I want my chick.
Pete and I worked really hard on this dinner, and there's lots of yummy food for you to eat.
No!
Vete a tu cuarto! Lita, don't do what Lizzie just said. What did you say? Cuatro?
No, quattro means quart, like quart of milk, right? She said you...
Some of this meatloaf, okay?
No! I want my chick!
For that? She's got a knife.
It's just a SpongeBob
It's still a knife. Look, kid, just put down the weapon, okay?
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun.
It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Let's listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the IDAHO4 case. And you know, I don't mean to inject humor into a situation that is not funny, but then again, I can't help but to laugh at some of the things that I see taking place in this case. The massive mainstream moron campaign to try to focus everybody's attention on certain aspects that may or may not be true. And the prosecution's blatant attempts to inject unnecessary so-called evidence surrounding issues in this case, or you wouldn't think it would be that necessary for them to inject if they had this rock-solid case against a young Brian Kohberger.
Hey!
Yet, we see it over and over and over again. In this video, I'm going to show you something that is, I mean, I gotta say, it's quite odd. It's very odd. And you know me, I go kind of above and beyond to look beyond what everybody else sees and find those little nuggets. So in a video I did maybe a week or two ago, I don't know, I do so many, I went over the defense's motion in limine to exclude, not something detrimental to the state's case, like exclude the DNA on the knife sheath, you know, bogus evidence. I went over their simple motion in limine to exclude the prosecution's expert, Rilene Nolan, rebuttal expert at that, to exclude her from using the terms touch or contact DNA in place of the term trace DNA, which at 168 picograms is exactly what it is. It's not even enough DNA for a standard kit to create a sample. And then you see Bicca Barlow went through and explained in the motion the community, the DNA community, the scientific DNA community, and how they have come to the conclusion that there is no way to distinguish between direct transfer and indirect transfer, and the amount of DNA on an item is no indication of whether it was directly or indirectly transferred. And the prosecution has taken, well, they have taken that as, you know, something that could really damage their case, because they have filed a motion in limine in return demanding that Rilene Nolan, who has perjured herself on the stand, by the way, we've already covered that in detail, and is nothing more than a glorified lab tech, but is integral in the IgG implementation in Idaho. But the prosecution really wants her to be able to get up on that stand and be able to say that she thinks, in her professional opinion, that that touch DNA was from direct transfer, and that she absolutely wants to be able to use those terms touch, because this case has such rock solid evidence against Brian Kohberger that they need to be able to use certain words in front of the jury and make certain statements that have no application to the evidence. So the motion that they filed in limine to try to get this stuff included is 11 pages. Much more information than their other motions in comparison. So this is really important to them. But the ludicrousy of everything that I just said to the side, it is the case law that Bill Thompson refers to in this objection to the defense's motion in limine. And I got to read it to you. Now, I'm working on some really big things for you with these docs that have come out with all this new information. I'm diving in deep for you, but I had to make this video once I looked at that, because I guarantee you nobody else out there would have checked this out. And it is just mind-boggling when you look at the context of what Bill Thompson cited. Let's just get into it. Now, I'm not going to read this entire doc because we get the gist of it, real quick. But this is the state's response to defendant's motion in limine, number 6, reference to touch and contact DNA. And you can see the Latall prosecuting attorney responds to defendant's motion in limine regarding the use of the terms touch or contact DNA or opining. Who likes to say opining all the time?
Hey, peeps, how are you all?
On the means or mechanism by which DNA came to be present on the knife sheath. This court should also deny defendant's motion because Ms. Nolan's disclosures demonstrate she will not use the phrase touch DNA in a manner that will mislead the jury. Well, then why do you need to use the phrase at all if you're not going to use it in a manner to mislead the jury? Yeah, right. Her opinions, which we've already seen on the stand, change in a matter of sentences when you put evidence in her face, as to the DNA found on the knife sheath, are admissible under the Idaho rules of evidence. Whoa, they are, Bill. What are you going to cite to prove that? And her opinions are proper rebuttal testimony. Ms. Nolan's use of the phrase touch DNA will not mislead or confuse the jury. Well, what will it do, Bill? The court may exclude relevant evidence if its probative value is substantially outweighed by a danger of one of the more following: unfair prejudice, confusing the issues, misleading the jury, and undue delay, wasting time, or needlessly presenting cumulative evidence. Ms. Nolan's testimony will be consistent with her disclosures, will not mislead the jury or confuse the issues. As her disclosures indicate, Ms. Nolan uses the phrase touch DNA only to distinguish that type of DNA with other kinds of DNA. DNA may be present in an item in the form of biological materials such as blood, semen, saliva, or may be left on an item when it is worn, wearer DNA, or handled, touch, or transfer DNA. Well, then why don't you just stick with transfer if you're not trying to mislead them there, bud? But no, it's a big deal to you, isn't it? Because you don't have any evidence in this case. She goes on to explain how DNA can be transferred to an item, including that it can be transferred from one person to another person before being deposited on the item. Look, here's where she says that. And then she describes at length various factors that can affect primary and secondary transfer, including the shedder status of the individual. Given Ms. Nolan's explanation of primary and secondary transfer, no reasonable juror will be misled by the use of her phrase touch DNA to mean defendant necessarily made physical contact with the knife sheath. Oh, really? That's not what the jury is going to think is being implied, that the defendant necessarily made physical contact with the knife sheath by her saying touch DNA? Well, if that's not enough, Bill, when you back it up with what else she wants to say, that Bick and Barlow clearly said the scientific community came to an agreement that could not be proven, you want to say, where is it? Let's just go ahead and look down here. Defendant seems to suggest Ms. Nolan should use the phrase trace DNA instead of touch. However, Ms. Nolan explains in her affidavit she does not use the phrase trace because it implies there was only a trace amount of DNA found. It implies there was only a trace amount found, 168 picograms. What would you call that, Bill? A orgy of DNA evidence, guy? You got to be kidding me. And using that term in this case would itself be misleading to the jury because a trace amount of DNA is not what was detected of item 1.1. Okay, man. So now, look, Bill's telling us that there was so much DNA detected on item 1.1 that it would be misleading the jury to call it trace, even though there wasn't enough for them to do a regular STR sample. And if they skimped it, used the most cutting edge of technology and was able to create it, there would be just enough left for Othram to take what was left and annihilate it, trying to do a IgG so the defense can't independently test it. But you're saying there's not enough trace DNA. I mean, there was so much DNA on that thing. Trace is a misuse of the term because there's so much, 168 picograms. Give me a break. I will not waste your time reading the rest of this BS because I got to do this. Oh, goodness. Where is it at? Wait a minute. Oh, where is it? Maybe it's down here. Oh, here we go. Let me read this to you. All right. Miss Nolan's opinion as to the likelihood of how defendant's DNA came to be on the knife sheath is proper expert testimony. Now, she's going to testify how BK touched it. Miss Nolan's opinion is admissible as expert testimony. A witness who is qualified as an expert by knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education may testify in the form of an opinion or otherwise if the expert's scientific, technical, or other specialized knowledge will help the trier of fact understand the evidence or determine a fact in the issue. Yeah, that's what you're trying to do, buddy. The function of the expert is to provide testimony on subjects that are beyond the common sense. Oh, wait a minute. The function, remember this one. The function of the expert is to provide testimony on subjects that are beyond the common sense, experience, and education of the average juror. So basically what you're saying is the average juror doesn't have any common sense, experience, or education to be able to understand when the state's lying to them. So just to make sure that they understand the lie, you need to be able to go above and beyond in lying to get it across to these incompetent jurors. But here's what's great, folks. To make that point and back up his argument, what does Thompson do? Oh my goodness. Thompson cites State versus Tankovich, 155 Idaho. Oh God. Wait a minute. Holding district court properly allowed expert to testify as to the meaning of SS, lightning bolts, because average jurors might not have that knowledge. Oh, really? Average jurors might not have the knowledge that SS lightning bolts stand for Hitler's SS and would not know that they were white supremacists, huh, Bill? Let's take a look at State versus Tankovich. Say it ain't so, Bill. Now, you mean to tell me that with the thousands of cases out there for you to cite, maybe tens of thousands, maybe more, that the case that you choose to cite to back up your argument is this case? You wouldn't, I don't know, have something on your mind you'd like to tell us, would you? Is that why you cited this case? Say it ain't so, Bill. Okay, so State versus Tankovich could only be in the Court of Appeals in the state of Idaho, I assure you. But what is the context of this case? Well, we won't go into a lot, but Frank Tankovich and his brothers, William and Ira, apparently were harassing some ethnic Americans at their property, and you know, they were doing what they do when they're white supremacists. And they were obviously in the wrong, but the methods they used to try to convict them on the basis that they were white supremacists were really kind of shady, like we're seeing here in this case. But I mean, they were obviously harassing these people. You could see by, you know, these terms that they were using, and they were on their property. So these jacks were absolutely in the wrong, but it's the analysis that Bill uses. And it's a terrible point that he's making when you look at the analysis that he's using here, because it absolutely goes against everything that he's saying. Any rational individual would be able to figure that out. In court, what happened was they tried to use the assailant's tattoo evidence against them, and Tankovich asserts that the court erred by admitting photographs of William and Ira's tattoos and expert testimony explaining the common meanings of the symbols depicted in the tattoos. He argues that this evidence was irrelevant and unfairly prejudicial, and that the expert testimony invaded the province of the jury. The tattoos depicted in the photographs include a tattoo on Ira's calf or ankle of the words Aryan Pride over an inverted pentagram, a tattoo of an eagle on Ira's back, a tattoo of SS lightning bolts on William's arm, and a tattoo on William's chest of the words Chris Forever, with one or more 3-leaf clovers embedded in the word Chris. No evidence was presented to suggest that Tankovich has any tattoos. The state's expert testified that tattoos of SS lightning bolts are commonly associated with the Aryan neo-Nazi belief systems or white supremacy belief systems, and that the 3-leaf clover tattoos are common symbols worn by the Aryan white supremacists. After the photographs were admitted into evidence, but before they were published to the jury and before the state presented expert testimony on the common meaning of the tattoos, the court instructed the jury not to consider the evidence that it is about to be presented to you with respect to the tattoos, necessarily including both the photographs and the expert testimony, in deciding the charge of malicious harassment against Tankovich. The court also gave the jury written instructions stating there has been no evidence of any tattoos on the person of Frank Tankovich. You should not consider the evidence about the tattoos in deciding the charge of malicious harassment against Frank Tankovich. We presume that the jury followed the jury instructions given by the trial court in reaching its verdict. So the judge said, don't acknowledge any of this testimony you're about to hear as reasons to believe that Frank Tankovich is a white supremacist. But then they go on to show his brother's tattoos, and it had an expert come in and testify that those tattoos were that of white supremacists of the Aryan culture. So do you think that went a long way in convicting Mr. Tankovich? I think so, yet we're expected to believe that that didn't have any effect on the jury because of the jury instructions given by the trial court, which, let me say this guy was guilty, and they should have put all this stuff in there as evidence because it actually did pertain to that situation. But it's just amazing to me that this is the case that Bill Thompson decides to cite in the IDAHO4 case in order to get his expert testimony in and try to say that it's not going to impact the jury based on what she's saying. What are you trying to tell us there, Bill, that Aryan neo-Nazi belief or white supremacist belief system is something that you're very familiar with, or else why in the heck would you even know this case exists? Say it ain't so, Bill. Yeah, and I really don't even know how to react to that one because, I have absolutely no love for white supremacists going out and harassing people. No love at all. I could give you some of the breakdown of my family, and there is Spanish and American, Cherokee, Indian. We have a myriad in my family, and I love all people. So, but I just don't understand the context here, because you're citing a case that goes against those Aryans, So you would think that you would want to really dig in and be a finder of fact and a fighter for truth and justice and get the right people involved in this behind bars. But then again, your familiarity with cases like that and willingness to cite them in this case is perplexing to me. But I thought that was so interesting and I had to share it with you. And now tonight, I got you a Friday night special coming out, and it is going to be a special one because we are going to go into those roommate texts that the defense let us in on, and we're going to go into the testimony, the witness statements of Miss Dillon to all those myriad of law enforcement personnel that the prosecution has kindly let us in on. And I think you'll enjoy the findings from that one. And then there's so much other information in this stuff. I mean, there's not enough minutes in the day. I'm taking a lot of the information and applying them to the investigation in the case. And I'll tell you, we'll be busy on that for a while because it's opening some eyes. And then there's obviously some other things that have been exposed in these filings that we need to be very aware of. So I will continue to bring you the coverage of this from these court docs. And then once we get past this, we'll dive really hard into the investigation, into the real investigation into this case. But please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms. Till next time, Pavarotti's out.
Fly away. It's the first time